Every year, the U.S. government publishes over 185,000 pages of new regulatory text in the Federal Register. 185,000 pages. And buried inside those pages are some of the most profitable business opportunities in America. Not tech companies, not venture-backed startups with ping-pong tables and Series A rounds. I'm talking about one-person operations, pickup trucks, and certification courses that turn government red tape into recurring high-margin cash flow. Here's what makes these businesses different from almost everything else you'll hear about online. The demand isn't generated by marketing. It isn't powered by trends or algorithms. It's manufactured by the government itself. Regulations, codes, mandates, and statutes that say if you don't hire this person, if you don't pass this test, if you don't file this report, you get fined, shut down, or sued. Your customers don't have a choice. They pay because the law says they have to. After studying the business models with the least competition and the most predictable cash flow, I found 15 that almost nobody talks about, and the last one on this list has the highest margins I've ever seen, with startup costs so low it almost feels like a mistake. My name is George. Let's get into it. Business 15. Forklift Operator Certification Training. Here's one hiding inside every warehouse, construction site, and distribution center in America. OSHA Standard 29 CFR 1910.178 requires every forklift operator to be formally trained and certified before they can legally touch the controls. Not recommended, required. And that certification must be renewed every 3 years. Employers who let uncertified operators run forklifts face OSHA fines up to $156,259 per willful violation. Now, think about the scale of demand. There are over 850,000 forklifts operating in the United States. Each one needs at least one certified operator. Many facilities run 2 to 3 shifts, meaning 2 to 3 operators per machine. And with average employee turnover in warehousing exceeding 40%, companies are constantly cycling through new hires who all need fresh certifications. The demand doesn't slow down, it regenerates. The training takes 4 to 8 hours. You charge $150 to $300 per student. A class of 15 generates $2,250 to $4,500 in a single day. Your materials cost is a manual, a training video, and a practical evaluation checklist. Margins run 75 to 85%. Startup cost is $3,000 to $8,000 for your trainer certification, course materials, and insurance. Here's the first pattern you'll notice on this list. The boring factor is the advantage. Nobody gets excited about teaching warehouse workers how to drive a forklift. Nobody puts that on their vision board. That's exactly why the training market is dominated by a handful of operators who face almost no local competition. Business 14. Well water testing and certification. Approximately 23 million American households rely on private wells for drinking water. In most states, when a property with a private well changes hands, a certified water quality test is legally required before the sale can close. Banks won't approve the mortgage without it. VA and FHA loans mandate it. County health departments enforce it. You collect a sample, mail it to a certified lab, and generate a compliance report. You charge $150 to $400 per property. The lab fee runs $50 to $100. The rest is margin. And because real estate transactions cluster in spring and summer, you can build a seasonal business generating $100,000 to $200,000 in 6 months of concentrated work. Here's what nobody tells you. If the water fails for coliform bacteria or nitrates, you become the person they call to recommend treatment solutions. That single $200 test opens the door to a $3,000 to $8,000 water treatment system installation. The test is the lead magnet. The remediation is the revenue. Business 13. Vehicle emissions testing stations. In 31 states and the District of Columbia, VEHICLE, owners are legally required to pass periodic emissions inspections to renew their registrations. Fail the test, and you can't renew your plates. The vehicle sits in your driveway until it passes. The emissions testing market generates over $2 billion annually in the United States. Each test takes 10 to 20 minutes and commands $20 to $50 per vehicle. That sounds small until you do the math. A single testing lane processing 30 vehicles a day at $35 each generates $1,050 daily, roughly $270,000 a year. Add a second lane, and you're over $500,000. Margins sit between 50 and 65% because the equipment, once purchased, has minimal operating costs. You're not buying new inventory every week. You're running the same machines on the same cars, and every test creates the same margin. The barrier to entry is the licensing. States restrict the number of authorized testing stations, require specific equipment, certifications, and mandate regular audits of your procedures. That regulatory gatekeeping is your moat. You're not competing with anyone who feels like opening a shop. You're competing only with the handful of operators who've cleared the licensing hurdle. And in many counties, the state itself limits how many stations can operate within a given radius, creating a geographic monopoly by design. Business 12, title search and abstracting services. Every real estate transaction in America requires a title search. Every single one. Before a bank will lend $300,000 for a home purchase, they need to verify that the seller actually owns the property, that there are no liens, judgments, or encumbrances in the chain of title. This isn't optional. It's a core requirement of lender underwriting guidelines and title insurance standards. A title search runs $200 to $600 per property. In commercial transactions, complex abstracts command $1,000 to $3,000. The work is primarily research, reviewing county recorder databases and historical deed chains from your laptop. No truck, no equipment. Startup costs run $2,000 to $5,000 for database access and professional liability insurance. Let's do the simple math. Completing 3 residential title searches a day at $350 each generates $1,050 daily, roughly $250,000 a year. The National Association of Realtors reported over 4 million existing home sales in 2025. Each one required a title search. That's a permanent floor of demand generated entirely by the legal requirements of property transfer. Business 11, I-9, Immigration Compliance Auditing. Here's one that barely anyone knows exists. Every employer in the United States is legally required under the Immigration and Nationality Act to verify the identity and work authorization of every employee using Form I-9. Every employee. And Immigration and Customs Enforcement conducts random audits. Fines start at $252 per paperwork error and climb to $2,507. Per instance, for knowingly hiring unauthorized workers, consultants charge $15 to $50 per I-9 form for auditing and remediation. A mid-sized company with 500 employees represents a $7,500 to $25,000 engagement. And because employee turnover generates new forms constantly, the work is inherently recurring. The compliance consulting market for I-9 and E-Verify services is growing at over 12% annually. Think about it like this. Every time a company hires or fires someone, they create a compliance obligation. In a country where 75 million people change jobs every year, you're not waiting for demand, you're swimming in it. Business 10, underground storage tank, testing, and compliance. There are over 500,000 regulated underground storage tanks across the United States, sitting beneath gas stations, commercial fleet yards, airports, and industrial facilities. EPA Regulation 40 CFR Part 280 mandates annual leak tightness testing, cathodic protection testing, and triennial spill and overfill containment inspections. Fail to comply, and the fines reach $50,000 per day. And if a tank leaks, cleanup costs range from $100,000 to over $1 million. Single truck operators generate $150,000 to $400,000 a year. Established multi-vehicle firms push $1 million to $5 million. Gross margins sit between 50 and 65%. Startup costs run $45,000 to $110,000 for specialized testing equipment, a service truck, and state environmental inspector certifications. Once gas station chains find a certified tester they trust, they retain them indefinitely through multi-year recurring contracts. Here's something almost nobody tells you about this space. A guest on the Acquiring Minds podcast described acquiring a 2-vehicle UST testing firm generating $800,000 in revenue with 35% net margins. The boring factor wasn't a drawback. It was the reason the business was available at a reasonable price. the reason no one had competed the margins away, and the reason cash flow was as steady as utility payments. Nobody acquires a tank testing company to brag about it at a cocktail party. That's why you can still buy one without a bidding war. Business 9. Boiler and pressure vessel inspection. ASM codes and state boiler laws require every commercial boiler and pressure vessel in hospitals, hotels, universities, manufacturing plants, and apartment buildings to be inspected annually by a certified third-party inspector, not an in-house maintenance worker, a state-commissioned or nationally certified third-party inspector. In most states, operating an uninspected boiler is a criminal misdemeanor. If someone is injured by an uninspected pressure vessel, the building owner's insurance can deny the claim entirely. The National Board of Boiler and Pressure Vessel Inspectors reports over 3 million boilers and pressure vessels in operation across the United States. The inspection takes 1 to 4 hours, depending on size and type. Fees range from $200 to $1,200 per unit. A single inspector covering 3 to 5 facilities per day generates $150,000 to $350,000 annually. Here's what most people don't realize. The certification pipeline is brutally narrow. Becoming a National Board-commissioned inspector requires years of experience as a boiler mechanic or plant engineer, followed by a rigorous technical exam. The American Society of Mechanical Engineers calls the current situation a critical shortage. When supply contracts, while demand stays constant, prices only go in one direction. Up. Business 8. Nutrient management planning for livestock operations. Under the EPA Clean Water Act, every concentrated animal feeding operation, dairies, hog farms, poultry operations, and cattle feedlots, must hold a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit and maintain a certified nutrient management plan. Only USDA NRCS certified technical service providers can legally sign off on these plans. Initial plans run $3,000 to $15,000. Annual compliance updates cost $2,000 to $6,000 per farm. A boutique consultancy managing 30 to 80 farm accounts generates $250,000 to $750,000 a year, with net margins between 25 and 40%. And here's the part that makes this business especially clever. Operators on Reddit's Our Farming community note that smart consultants position nutrient management not as a government tax, but as a cost saver. Optimized manure application reduces the farmer's need for commercial synthetic fertilizer, saving thousands per season. You're selling compliance and saving them money at the same time. That's how you build a client roster that never churns. Business 7. Fire sprinkler and alarm system inspection. NFPA 25 requires every commercial fire sprinkler system to be inspected quarterly, with annual and 5-year deep inspections. NFPA 72 mandates annual testing of fire alarm and detection systems. This isn't the fire extinguisher hanging on the wall. This is the infrastructure embedded in ceilings, walls, and mechanical rooms. If a building's sprinkler or alarm system hasn't been inspected on schedule, the fire marshal issues immediate violations and insurance carriers can void the building's fire coverage entirely. The fire protection services market exceeds $80 billion globally, according to industry data compiled from IBI's World and Market Research reports. Individual inspection contracts for mid-size commercial buildings run $2,000 to $8,000 annually. Large complexes, hospitals, and high-rises command $15,000 to $50,000 per year. Margins sit between 35 and 55%. Here's the thing. Most property managers don't understand the difference between their various fire code obligations. They know they need something inspected. They don't know what. The operator who shows up explains the separate NFPA standards that apply to their building and bundles everything into a single annual contract, becomes the one-stop compliance partner they never want to replace. That stickiness, that lock-in, is what turns a one-time inspection into a decade-long relationship. Morgan Housel writes about this in Same as Ever. The businesses that survive the longest aren't the ones with the best products. They're the ones embedded in systems that can't function without them. When a property manager bundles their sprinkler, alarm, and fire suppression inspections with a single provider, that provider becomes infrastructure, not a vendor, infrastructure. And infrastructure doesn't get replaced on a whim. Business 6. Cannabis compliance consulting. Here's one growing faster than almost anything else on this list. As of 2026, 40 states have legalized medical or recreational cannabis, but the regulatory frameworks governing the industry are among the most complex in American business. Seed-to-sale tracking systems, mandatory security camera requirements with specific retention periods, strict waste disposal protocols, packaging and labeling regulations that change from state to state. A single missed reporting deadline can trigger a license suspension that costs the operator $50,000 to $200,000 in lost revenue. The cannabis compliance consulting market was valued at $1.8 billion in 2024 and is growing at 18.5% annually, according to Grandview Research. And here's why nobody competes in it. The rules are so new, so fragmented across jurisdictions, and so frequently amended that even licensed operators struggle to keep up. General business consultants don't touch it because they don't understand the regulations, and lawyers charge $400 an hour. That creates a sweet spot for specialized compliance consultants who charge $5,000 to $25,000 for initial licensing applications and $2,000 to $8,000 per month for ongoing retainers. Think about it like this. In a gold rush, you don't mine gold. You sell the permits, the maps, and the compliance stickers. The miners are legally required to carry Business 5 crane and heavy equipment inspection, OSHA Standard 1926, Subpart CC, and SMEB 30. Mandate that all commercial cranes undergo thorough annual third-party inspections before operating on construction sites. Union stewards and site superintendents enforce this without exception. If the annual inspection sticker is expired by even one day, the entire job site gets shut down. On Reddit's Our Blue-Collar community, an operator described the pricing leverage. A site shutdown costs $10,000 or more per hour in idle labor. When a general contractor calls for a rush inspection, you charge $1,500 for 3 hours of work, and they won't negotiate. Standard fees range from $300 to $2,500 per crane. A single inspector covering 4 to 6 jobs per day generates $250,000 to $1.5 million annually. The startup runs $35,000 to $80,000 for an outfitted service truck and NDT testing equipment. But the real barrier is the NCCCO certification, which requires years of field experience. That pipeline bottleneck is what keeps margins healthy and competition thin. Business 4, medical device calibration services, FDA Regulation 21 CFR Part 820 and ISO IEC 17025, accreditation require that every piece of medical equipment, defibrillators, infusion pumps, anesthesia machines, patient monitors, must be calibrated by an accredited provider on a regular schedule. Hospitals, surgical centers, dental offices, and labs are legally prohibited from using uncalibrated equipment. The market is valued at $1.9 billion to $3.5 billion and growing at 5 to 13% annually. According to Grandview Research and Business Research Insights, solo mobile technicians generate $150,000 to $400,000 a year. Regional operations push $1.2 million to $3.5 million. Here's what nobody tells you. Large calibration corporations target major hospital networks. That means private surgical centers, dental clinics, and regional labs are severely underserved. And once a provider integrates your calibration records into their regulatory documentation, they almost never switch. The risk of a regulatory gap during a provider transition is too high. Your stickiness isn't built on customer service. It's built on regulatory fear. Business 3. Fleet Safety Compliance Consulting. Over 990,000 registered interstate motor carriers operate in the United States. 91% run fewer than 6 trucks. These small operators must comply with FMCSA regulations that update constantly. ELD mandates, hours of service rules, driver qualification, file requirements, and drug and alcohol clearinghouse reporting. A failed FMCSA audit shuts the carrier down overnight and spikes insurance premiums by 300%. Small fleet owners are truckers, not regulatory attorneys. They need someone to run their safety department. Consultants charge $150 to $250 per driver per month on retainer. One entrepreneur featured on the Acquiring Minds podcast built a $1.8 million annual revenue agency providing managed compliance for delivery fleets. With less than 3% annual client churn because replacing the service requires hiring a full-time employee at double the cost. Let's do the math. 50 fleets at $2,000 per month equals $1.2 million annually. The global risk, safety, and compliance consulting market was valued at $41.97 billion in 2026, expanding to $95.92 billion by 2035, according to Business Research Insights. And every year, the regulatory burden increases. Your business grows with it. Business 2, anti-money laundering compliance consulting for community banks. The Bank Secrecy Act, the USA Patriot Act, and FinCEN regulations mandate that every financial institution must conduct independent annual BSAML audits. Federal regulators issue consent decrees and millions in fines for non-compliance. Big Four accounting firms charge $150,000 to $300,000 per audit. Community banks with $150 million in assets can't afford that, but they still need it. Annual audit fees for boutique consultants run $15,000 to $50,000 per bank. Fractional chief compliance officer retainers run $5,000 to $15,000 per month. On Reddit's our small business community. A former bank compliance officer described acting as fractional CCO for 5 community banks at $6,000 per month each, clearing over $350,000 a year working 30 hours a week from home. Net margins between 40 and 60%. The AML compliance market was valued at $3.5 billion in 2024 and is projected to reach $7.2 billion by 2030, according to Grandview Research. The startup cost is $3,000 to $12,000 for a CAMS certification and professional liability insurance. No truck, no warehouse, no equipment. Just expertise that federal regulators demand and community banks cannot function without. And now, Business 1, the one I told you about at the beginning: liquor license, consulting, and expediting. Every bar, restaurant, nightclub, and hotel that wants to sell alcohol must obtain a liquor license from their state's excise or liquor control board. And the process is, by deliberate design, one of the most convoluted regulatory mazes in American business. Multi-agency zoning approvals, 500-foot proximity restrictions from churches and schools, background investigations, community board hearings, 50-page filing packages where a single error sends you back to the start. Here's what makes this business extraordinary. The startup cost is $2,000 to $10,000. Website, CRM, legal research tools, and a business entity. There's no equipment, no truck, no warehouse, no employees. Your product is knowledge of a system that nobody else wants to understand. Gross margins run 80 to 90%. Net margins hit 50 to 70%. Those are the highest margins on this entire list. Standard application expediting fees range from $3,500 to $15,000 per engagement. In states like California, Florida, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, where license quotas restrict the total number available, consultants also broker license transfers. A single transfer deal generates $10,000 to $50,000 in fees. On Reddit's our Barowners community, a bar owner described paying an expediter $8,500. She knew every clerk at the state liquor authority, fixed paperwork errors on the spot, and secured approval in 90 days. A venue down the street tried the DIY route, got rejected twice, and lost $150,000 in rent sitting empty while waiting for reapproval. The consultant's $8,500 fee saved them from a 6-figure disaster. Here's the math that should stop you. One consultant closing 3 applications per month at $8,000 each generates $288,000 annually. Add 2 license transfer deals per quarter at $25,000 each, and you're over $488,000. All from a home office. All from knowing how to navigate a system that regulators designed to be confusing. No inventory, no equipment depreciation, no employees. Just a phone, a laptop, and relationships with the right clerks. Now take a step back and look at this entire list. 15 businesses. Not one of them will ever go viral. Not one will be featured on a tech blog or invited to pitch at a startup weekend. But every single one shares a characteristic that separates them from 99% of the businesses people chase online. The demand is non-negotiable. It's written into law, into building codes, into federal mandates, and municipal ordinances. Your customers don't pay you because they want to. They pay you because a regulator, a fire marshal, a lender, or a judge told them they have to. Walker Deibel writes about this in Buy Then Build. The best businesses to own are the ones where customer demand is structurally embedded in the operating environment, where external forces, not marketing budgets, drive revenue. Every business on this list fits that description perfectly. Let me be honest with you for a moment. I spent years looking at businesses the way most people do, through the lens of what sounds impressive, what looks good on a pitch deck, what makes people nod at a dinner party. And that filter led me straight to the most competitive, most volatile, most stressful corners of the business world. The first time I seriously studied regulatory businesses, the kind nobody talks about, I couldn't believe how many quiet operators were outturning the flashy founders I'd been admiring. Not by a little, by a lot. Think about two people. Tyler spends 4 years building a series of online businesses, a content agency, a dropshipping store, an AI productivity tool. Each one takes off briefly, then collapses when the platform changes its algorithm. Or 200 competitors clone his model. He's talented. He works 70-hour weeks, but he's rebuilt from zero 4 times because the market moved on. Meanwhile, a woman named Rachel gets her BPAT certification and starts testing backflow prevention valves for commercial properties. Within a year, she has 400 annual accounts. By year 2, she hires a technician and adds fire sprinkler inspections. By year 3, she's clearing $600,000 in revenue with a 2-person operation. She doesn't have a personal brand. She doesn't have a social media following. She has regulatory certifications and a route. And while Tyler restarts every 12 months, Rachel's revenue compounds because her clients can't leave. The law won't let them. For years in, Tyler has launched 5 businesses and earned a total of $63,000. Rachel has earned over $1.4 million doing the exact same thing every single day. And that's the uncomfortable truth behind this entire list. The money was never hiding in the exciting ideas. It never was. It was hiding in the regulations that nobody wanted to read, in the codes nobody wanted to study, in the certifications nobody wanted to earn. The businesses with the least competition aren't the ones that need the most creativity. They're the ones that require the most patience with bureaucracy. And patience with bureaucracy is the one skill that almost nobody is willing to develop. The question isn't which of these businesses sounds the most exciting. None of them do. That's the entire point. The question is, which one matches what you already know, where you already live, and what you can start with the resources you have right now. If this video opened your eyes to a different way of thinking about business, hit that like button. It costs you nothing, and it helps more than you know. Subscribe if you want us to keep discovering opportunities hiding in boring places. Tell me in the comments which of these 15 businesses surprised you the most. I'm George, and I'll see you in the next video.